In this video, you're going to learn how to write a function. A function is a section of code that has a name, and it's useful because it helps you organize your code, and you can use it over and over again so you don't have to write as much code. You just reuse the code again. So here you can see that we have the setup function, which you're used to seeing. That one will automatically run as soon as you click the run button. But we can also add other custom functions that won't automatically run, such as this one, the tree function. So whenever you're creating a function, you always start with the word function, and then you give it a name that describes what it does. So since this function draws a tree, I named it tree. You have to make sure that this name is only one word. We can't put spaces in the name. And then we always follow the name with parentheses. After that, on the next line, we put an opening curly bracket. And then to end the function, we put our closing curly bracket. So this is similar to a for loop in that we've got a function header, and then the function body is between the curly brackets. And the function body says what the function does. So here I've just put in code to draw a tree. So it's a triangle and a rectangle, a fairly simple tree. But if I run this, you'll see that it doesn't actually draw a tree anywhere. And that's because the tree function isn't actually running. The only functions that run automatically are special functions like setup and like draw. So if we want to run the tree function, we have to call the tree function from one of those special functions. So to call it, we write the name and the parentheses and a semicolon. So very similar to how we call other functions that are built in, like background or create canvas. So now if I run it, it's going to run setup, which will set the canvas size, set the background color, and then jump down here and run the tree code. So now you can see that a tree shows up. So that's nice. It helps us organize our code, but we haven't actually been able to reduce the amount of code that we have to write. So to do that, we're going to modify this function so that it can draw a tree anywhere that we tell it to. So the first step is we're going to add some parameters. Parameters are a special kind of variable that we create in between the parentheses for our function. So I'm going to add parameters x and y, and that'll tell us where to draw the tree. Now to use those and actually draw the tree somewhere else, I'm going to have to change where I'm drawing the triangle and the rectangle. So I'm going to change this to be x and this to be y. So the top of my tree is now xy. This is going to be, instead of 250, it's going to be x plus 50. Before I had one corner at 200 and one at 250. Now it's at x and x plus 50. This is going to be y plus 80. Again, this was 0, and this was 80 pixels below it. So now if this was at y, this one's going to be 80 pixels below y. This one's going to be x minus 50. Again, because before this was 200 and this was 150, which was 50 less than this one. And then y plus 8. This one, 190 is 10 less than 200, so that's going to be x minus 10. Y plus 80. And the width and height are going to stay the same. Those don't depend on where the tree is. The rectangle always has the same width and height. So now this can draw a tree anywhere, but when we call our function, we're going to have to tell it where to draw. So it doesn't know what x and y are unless we type numbers in here. So I'm going to say, let's draw this at 300, 400. So now when we tell it to run the tree function, x, our parameter, gets the value of 300. Y gets the value of 400. So the first corner on our triangle is going to be 300, 400. Then our next corner is going to be at 350, 480, and so on. So we'll run this, and you can see our tree now shows up at 300, 400. So this is useful because now we can draw lots of trees just by calling the tree function again. So I don't have to rewrite the triangle and the rectangle every time I want to draw another tree. I just put in the parameters for where to draw it. And now I'm going to have 2 trees. So we can add as many trees as we want this way. Now if we really want to reduce the amount of code that we write to draw a lot of trees, we can use a for loop to call our function. So we can add a for loop. And we'll start this maybe at 30 and repeat as long as it's less than our height, which is 500. So our canvas is 500 pixels tall. We're going to make a vertical column of trees. And they're going to be spaced out about 90 pixels apart. So in the body of our for loop, we're going to call the tree function. And we have to put in our parameters for x and y. So since we want a vertical column, all of our trees are going to be lined up at the same x position. So I'm just going to put in here 500. And then we're going to use our loop variable I as the y position. So our first tree is going to be drawn at 530, because I starts at 30. And then our next tree is going to be at 500, 120, because we're adding 90 here. So then I'm going to run this. Oh, it looks like I have a missing parentheses. So I'm going to go back to my code. And it looks like I typed a comma actually instead of a semicolon. All right, so now we'll run this. And we can see that we get a column of trees here. And that's coming from our for loop. And this is very similar to calling ellipse or rectangle, but now we're just calling our own custom function that we created with parameters.